is a major concern and a threat for many. Is there hope to build the peaceful and prosperous nation that was envisaged at our dawn of democracy? Well, today in studio with us, we have Wits lecturer from the University of the Witwatersrand, focusing in on violence, Dr Malose Langa. We've got Statistician General Pali from our Pretoria studios, and also from the CSVR's Executive Director, we've got Nomfundo Mogapi. Thank you very much again for being with us and for staying with us through the broadcast this morning. It almost feels that we've been it's been quite a hard discussion up till now, because we really have been speaking about the fact that we are a violent society, the kinds of violence that present itself, the statistics showing huge increases. It's not getting better, it is getting worse. But I think in this hour we really need to try and focus on solutions. So before we actually get some solutions from you, one of the biggest issues that we face as a country is that of xenophobia. We've seen so many violent crimes surrounding xenophobia hitting news headlines and being reported on, to the fact of, I mean, you'll remember back in that day when we actually saw a man being burnt to death and people standing around cheering it. I mean, that was a sign of xenophobia that erupted around the country, and it has not ended. Well, yesterday, during the state visit of Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe, our president, Jacob Zuma, had this to say about our neighboring countries.
The historic fraternal relations between our two countries necessitate that we work closely together for the betterment of the lives of our peoples, and also to promote sustainable development in our region and continent. Since the formation of and formalization of relations between South Africa and Zimbabwe in 1994, our two countries have enjoyed cordial bilateral relations under the structured mechanisms of the Joint Commission for Cooperation and Joint Permanent Commission on Defense and Security. These structured mechanisms have facilitated consultations and official engagements between our two countries and provided platforms from which issues of mutual interest could be raised and discussed. Our deliberations of today put great emphasis on the importance of signing the agreement on the establishment of the Binational Commission, whose objective is to take our relations to a higher level and to be led by the heads of state of our respective countries. We have also just witnessed the signing of other agreements to further enhance our relations. The Memorandum of Understanding on Diplomatic Consultations will establish a mechanism for regular diplomatic consultations on issues of strengthening bilateral relations, security and cooperation in Africa, and on issues of mutual interests. The agreement on cooperation on water resources management and the establishment and functioning of the Joint Water Commission are intended to enhance cooperation in water resources planning, development, and management in the spirit of mutual understanding and benefit.
All right, that was our president speaking yesterday during the visit of Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe. All of this happening while a lot of foreigners, and those were foreign nationals in the streets of Durban, had water cannon guns shot at them. 300 foreign nationals gathered at Curry's Fountain. The group gathered to march against the recent xenophobic attacks that were taking place in Durban. That's just one incident that happened yesterday. Pali, what is the situation when it comes to xenophobic violence? We can hear our president speaking and asking us to embrace foreign nationals in our country, but the reality is that's not really happening, is it? How bad is the situation?
Well, I think the xenophobic attacks need to be condemned because, I mean, we are African, and South Africa was embraced by the community of nations and Africans in particular. So reciprocating under these circumstances is very important because whatever is happening here and happening elsewhere may happen again, and therefore we have to learn to embrace each other and one another. I'm very positive about the continent and its prospect for resolving the problems that we see currently. I mean, there's great potential on the continent. It has all kinds of resources. And in order to exploit these resources for the benefit of development, free movement of skills and people in Africa, in particular Africans, is a critical element of what we have to do. So xenophobia doesn't have location and space in looking at the development of Africa going forward. It's a very small mind when people become xenophobic. They constrain the possibility and prospects for moving forward. However, one understands that under the circumstances, people see their noses and they cannot see beyond their nostrils and their stomachs.
You know, Nomfundo, we talk about xenophobia, but it's the violence associated with it that is a huge problem. We have the incident we spoke about, Midomasia being dragged behind a vehicle. We speak about this man who was set alight in front of a bunch of cheering township dwellers who were enjoying the sight of a man being burnt to death purely because he wasn't a South African. The reality is it's the fear of stealing jobs that are not there. It's the fear of taking houses that are not available to South Africans. So there's a lot that's boiling under this, but how do we work around it? We're trying to find solutions in this hour. So what do we do to try and work around the situation of xenophobia?
I think the first thing is to ensure that we have a coherent approach that addresses all these issues, because our tendency in public discourse is only to focus on the violence and condemning it, which is really important. We need to condemn that. But there's usually a denial that we are a xenophobic society and no ownership of that, such that you even find some leaders making very careless xenophobic statements that then people hook up to. Xenophobia from different levels of society and even from leadership that fuels the xenophobic violence. We need to deal with this internalized dehumanization and devaluing of life, and I'll say of Black life, because these people who get dehumanized like this are usually Africans from Africa, not other foreigners. And I think it's really important to talk about the race component of this. And then finally, of course, to understand that this is again the cry for people. Some of the people who worked in communities said to us, we know that if we attack foreigners, government will listen to us or leaders will listen to us. So it's people who are really desperate and saying we need our basic needs to be met, we are frustrated. And this is again one of the language that we are using. We had a research we produced in 2011 on the violence service delivery and xenophobia. We called it the smoke that calls, because the community says that the smoke is the one that calls the leaders because they only respond to that. So we have to address all of these four things, not just only one of them, in order to solve this problem.
Yeah. Your views on xenophobia, Malose?
I mean, I guess adding on what Nomfundo is saying, I mean, I guess it's lack of awareness, especially with our community, members. I mean, to say these people are not here for the sake of being here. They come from, countries where human rights violations, it's a major problem. So I think what we need to do is to go in communities and raise awareness. And I think the second one is around the woundedness and the deadness and the marginalization that people feel on a daily basis. So obviously, as Nomfundo said, around people then target the foreign nationals on the basis that if it happens, there'll be all this sort of media attention. But when you look at it, it goes back to what we started with. I mean, to say the colonial project was to dehumanize Africans. So now we have this internalized hatred of our fellow Africans. Yeah. So obviously when people are marginalized, you project your anger onto other people who are also marginalized. So obviously here it's a struggle of the poor against the poor. And I feel we need to get to a point where we then say what is the real cause of this violence that we see on a daily basis. But just a quick point is that there are all these inconsistent messages that we had President Zuma saying we need to embrace our neighbors. But we know on a daily basis, foreign nationals go to police stations to report cases of crime. Yeah. But what happens? Police do not take their cases. They get robbed in some cases by the police whom we expect them to protect them. Yeah. So obviously even what we saw in Soweto, where their shops were being looted, we have seen images of police just loitering around and not doing anything to protect them. So obviously there's a sense of feeling we are not protected in this country.
Indeed, and again it comes back to that issue of leadership and setting an example. So let's take a break. When we return, let's talk about that, the leadership, the example that's being set by everybody around us, not necessarily just our president, but everybody below that. What is that doing to our values in society? Stay tuned.